They know every syllable of every word, which is what I came here to do. You start a song, they finish it. I start the next one, they finish it. I can do that all night. And I'm telling you, man, it's been a long time, for all of us. But anytime I hear Much Too Young to Feel This Damn Old, it just takes me right back to that.
Yeah, wow.
There are moments in a career when everything a person has built over decades begins to feel fragile. Not because of one mistake, not because of a single bad decision, but because several forces arrive at the same time and push against a foundation that once seemed unshakable. Garth Brooks is living through one of those moments right now. And the news coming out of his camp in recent days suggests that things are not getting better anytime soon. In fact, by most accounts from people who have been watching closely, the situation surrounding one of country music's greatest legends has taken another difficult turn, and the details deserve a careful and honest look. To understand why what is happening right now carries so much weight, you have to first appreciate the scale of what Garth Brooks built over the course of his career. This is not a man who had a few hits and a loyal regional following. This is the best-selling solo artist in American music history by SoundScan Records, a man whose worldwide album sales have surpassed 170 million copies. He did not just conquer country music. He redefined what a country artist could achieve commercially, culturally, and in terms of live performance. When he stepped onto a stage, he brought pyrotechnics, elaborate lighting, and the kind of raw kinetic energy that audiences associated with arena rock, not a genre that had historically favored restraint and tradition. He was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. He received the Library of Congress Gershwin Prize for Popular Song, becoming its youngest recipient at the time. He walked away from all of it voluntarily in the late 1990s to raise his daughters, and when he came back, audiences welcomed him as if he had never left. That is the kind of loyalty that takes decades to earn. And that is precisely what makes the current situation so striking. The legal battle that has been hanging over Brooks since the fall of 2024 continues to cast a long shadow over everything he does. A woman who worked as a hairstylist and makeup artist for both Brooks and his wife Trisha Yearwood filed a lawsuit containing allegations of sexual assault, sexual harassment, and battery. The allegations, which Brooks has denied firmly and completely, describe incidents beginning in 2019 and continuing through 2024. His legal team has argued that the lawsuit was preceded by an extortion attempt, and Brooks himself filed a preemptive lawsuit in Mississippi under a pseudonym, calling the situation an attempt to hold a loaded gun to his head financially. He stated publicly that paying any settlement amount would be equivalent to admitting guilt, and he refused to do it. The California case, where the complainant filed after Brooks' Mississippi action, survived a motion to dismiss in late 2024. The Mississippi case was later declared moot, leaving the California proceedings as the primary legal battleground. Both sides have requested jury trials, and as of early 2026, the case remains unresolved and very much alive. Every procedural step in a federal civil case generates new filings, new media coverage, and new rounds of public conversation. That cycle shows no sign of ending soon. What makes the legal situation particularly painful for someone with Brooks' specific public identity is not just the nature of the allegations themselves. It is the direct collision those allegations create with the image he spent his entire career building. Garth Brooks was never marketed as an edgy outlaw or a complicated anti-hero. His brand was warmth, generosity, and genuine decency. He was the guy who cried at his own concerts because he was so moved by the connection with his audience. He was the guy who walked away from fame to be a present father. He was the guy whose charitable work through his Teammates for Kids Foundation touched tens of thousands of lives. His identity as a good man was not a side note to his career. It was the center of it. The lawsuit attacks that center directly, and regardless of what the courts ultimately decide, the headlines have already done damage that a legal victory cannot fully reverse. Beyond the lawsuit, Brooks has been navigating the complicated aftermath of the bar he spent 3 years building and publicly dreaming about out loud. Friends in Low Places Bar and Honky Tonk opened on Broadway in Nashville in March of 2024. The venue is massive, spanning more than 54,000 square feet across 4 floors, making it the largest honky-tonk on the entire lower Broadway strip. Brooks had talked about it endlessly in interviews, describing with genuine excitement the vision he had for the place. He wanted classic country music coming through the speakers. He wanted the atmosphere of a true dive bar at a grand scale. He said he wanted guests to walk in and immediately feel safe, welcomed, and surrounded by people with good manners. He compared the experience he was aiming for to the reliability and warmth of Chick-fil-A, which is about as clear a promise as a person can make to a fan base built on authenticity. The opening week reviews told a sharply different story. Customers reported encountering an undisclosed entertainment surcharge on their bills that had not been posted anywhere visible. Some visitors reported being unable to pay with cash, which struck many people as genuinely bizarre for a venue presenting itself as a traditional honky-tonk. The most damaging complaints, however, were about the music itself. Multiple reviewers reported that during their visits, the bar was playing hip-hop and pop songs rather than country music. Reports of Flo Rida tracks and pop covers circulating through a venue that its founder had specifically promised would feel like classic George Strait and Merle Haggard territory created a particularly pointed contrast. Some loyal fans felt genuinely misled. The bar continued operating and remained a prominent presence on Lower Broadway, but the opening narrative had already been written, and it followed Brooks into one of the most difficult years of his public life. None of that would have been quite as damaging on its own. But it arrived on top of a cultural controversy that had already fractured a meaningful part of his core audience more than a year earlier. In June of 2023, Brooks stated publicly that his upcoming bar would serve every brand of beer, including Bud Light, which at the time was at the center of a sweeping conservative consumer boycott following a promotional partnership the brand had entered into with a transgender influencer. Other country artists had made very visible stands against the brand. Kid Rock had filmed himself destroying cases of it. John Rich and Travis Tritt had both publicly announced their venues would not carry it. The expectation among a large portion of the conservative country music audience was that the biggest name in their genre would align with them. Brooks did the opposite. He confirmed he would serve the beer and added a comment about people needing to come to his bar with love or find somewhere else on Broadway to spend their time. The internet took that comment and ran with it in ways that were not always accurate to the full context, but the impression it created spread widely and quickly. Fans posted videos of themselves throwing out his albums and merchandise. People who had followed him since the early 1990s declared themselves done with him. The phrase "Go Woke, Go Broke" appeared in comment sections across every platform where his name was mentioned. Texas Governor Greg Abbott amplified a fabricated story claiming Brooks had been booed off a stage, which reflected how agitated the political right had become over what was, at its core, a beer announcement. Brooks doubled down in a Facebook live stream, saying that diversity and inclusiveness had always been who he was and that he was not going to change. For people who agreed with his position, it was a rare and genuinely brave moment for a country music figure. For the portion of his audience that held deeply conservative values and had spent 30 years treating him as one of their own, it felt like a fundamental betrayal of trust. The compounding effect of all three of these situations, the beer controversy, the bar's troubled launch, and the ongoing lawsuit, has produced something that no individual controversy in Brooks' long career has produced before. Throughout his life in public, he had weathered genuine storms. The Chris Gaines alter ego experiment in 1999 baffled and alienated audiences in ways that became legendary in music industry circles. His walkout from the Super Bowl national anthem performance in 1993 over a dispute with NBC created lasting friction with the NFL. His years-long refusal to make his catalog available on streaming platforms kept his music away from an entire generation of younger listeners during some of their most formative years. Each of those controversies eventually faded. His tours continued to break records. His fan base remained loyal. His reputation as one of the greats survived intact. What is different about the current situation is the compression and the accumulation. 3 separate sources of serious damage arrived within roughly 18 months of each other, and none of them has fully resolved. They sit on top of each other and reinforce each other in ways that make the overall picture considerably darker than any single piece of it would suggest on its own. People who have been close to Brooks during this stretch have described a man under a level of personal pressure that has no real parallel in his previous experience. By all accounts, he reads every headline and processes every criticism personally and deeply, even during easier years when the criticism was relatively minor. The lawsuit represents something qualitatively different from any professional setback because it strikes at his identity as a husband, as a person of character, and as someone who built an entire career on the premise of being genuinely trustworthy. Reports from within his circle have described disrupted sleep, elevated physical stress, and a sustained anger at the situation that runs deeper than ordinary frustration. The knowledge that a legal victory, if it comes, cannot undo the months of headlines that have already circulated is its own particular source of torment for someone with his reputation and his sense of personal legacy. Trisha Yearwood has remained visibly and consistently at his side through all of it. She performed alongside him at the state funeral for former President Jimmy Carter at the Washington National Cathedral. She appeared with him at the Grand Ole Opry's 100th anniversary celebration. When her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame was unveiled, he was there. Every joint public appearance has carried an unmistakable message of unity, and by all accounts, her support has been the primary stabilizing force in his life during this period. But her name was also drawn into the lawsuit through filings by the complainant's legal team, which claimed she had been aware of the alleged behavior and failed to intervene. Given that the complainant had originally been her employee before Brooks brought her onto his own team, that claim placed Yearwood in an extraordinarily uncomfortable position, professionally and personally. She had spent her entire career building a reputation as one of country music's most respected and scandal-free figures. Having her name appear in connection with these proceedings, even indirectly, was its own category of damage. There were also reports, framed casually but noticed widely, that Brooks and Yearwood had been seriously discussing purchasing a home in Ireland, a country Yearwood had fallen deeply in love with during a tour they had done together. In the context of everything surrounding them in late 2024, the idea of two American icons contemplating a significant presence overseas landed differently than a simple real estate conversation might have under quieter circumstances. Where things stand as of early 2026 is this. The California lawsuit remains unresolved, with both sides having requested jury trials and the discovery process expected to generate ongoing media coverage for the foreseeable future. The Bar on Broadway continues to